So thank you very, very much for coming. I'm very happy to be back here. I want to thank Kim and Urs and all the people that made it possible for me to be here. And Yifeng, thank you so much for driving me. And thank you very much for taking the time this evening out of your evening activities to come and talk about a topic that is sobering. Some people think it's morbid, but I actually find it can motivate your practice. So we're going to talk about that tonight. It's a short evening, so we won't be able to go heavily in depth, but hopefully I can give you some information about talking about just the level of impermanence, for one, to start to look at change. And then from there, how do the Tibetans view, more traditionally, how the Tibetans view death, and a traditional 9-point death meditation from our tradition. And then we will also talk about what kind of happens to the body and what happens to the mind. Is it any different, the mind and the body? And how do you get out of the body? How does the consciousness get out of the body according to the Tibetan tradition and get into another form? Is there another rebirth? And we'll also talk about practical applications. What if you're caregiving somebody, and how do we die? Your question, Russ, how do we die? And how can we have a good death? And how can we be there for other people that are dying in a more beneficial way? Okay. So let's just sit for a moment. Just close your eyes. Find a comfortable posture for your body. We're going to work our way into, from our motivation, from having a positive motivation. And again, just slowly allow your body to find some comfort. And if you're in a chair, if you can just have your feet straight down, it's perfectly fine to meditate in a chair. Absolutely fine. But then the body's balanced. And if you can try not to lean too heavily against the back of the chair, your back will become strong over time. And otherwise, whatever posture's comfortable, we sometimes place our palms in our lap, basically at the level of the navel, face up with the right palm on the left. Thumbs are pressed together like a little triangle. So the triangle's reminiscent of higher level practices in our tradition. It's also an opener to the heart chakra, the energy center at the heart, constricting diluted views and negative mind states. It's right against the body, so it keeps the body erect. You can send your shoulder blades down your back if that's helpful. And the head is slightly tipped forward. Eyes are lightly closed or slightly open. Focus towards the tip of the nose or the floor in the space in front of you. The lips are lightly together. The teeth are slightly apart. And the tongue can be curled to touch the upper palate and the mouth behind the front teeth. This is one of our standard meditation postures that is said to lend support to meditation. As you settle into this position, take a couple of minutes to scan your body from your head down to your feet and toes, releasing any tension you're holding in your body. And allowing an inhalation, a normal inhalation, open up space in any tension. And allowing an exhalation to release that tension. And then let's consider our motivation right now. Just reflect for a moment on your purpose for being here. So you may get some information about the dying process according to the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. Perhaps it helps you wake up your practice. Motivate your practice, as well as helping you, if you can wake up your practice, to have a more peaceful death. But can we use our lives also to move along this path to full awakening so we can be of the most benefit to all living beings? That's the motivation in this tradition. If you like that, feel free to fold that into your practice. Take a moment right now, directing your awareness in a most positive way. Set that motivation for our time together and all the activities of the rest of your day. So please reflect right now and just notice changes in your body that you're aware of right now. For instance, you may swallow, you may have an itch, you may notice a sensation in your body. I just want you to be aware for a moment the changes at this level that are going on in your body right now. I'll call it gross impermanence. Just notice that changing nature. Your respiration, for instance. Every time you inhale, you're inhaling different molecules of air to a different degree. Every time you exhale, different molecules. Notice the respiration for a moment, the changing nature of that. Imagine now on a more subtle level, subtle impermanence. Change is going on in your body right now that you're not aware of. Imagine. Blood is running through your system. Your heart is beating. All the organs functioning in a certain way. All the way down to a molecular level. Changes going on in your body right now. Just imagine. How about your mind? Is that changing? Notice the thoughts that pop up. Turns into another thought. Another experience. Then a little space in the mind. Another idea. Notice the changing nature of your mind. Is it changing at all? And what about outside the body and mind? Outside the body and mind. Just the room right now. Just explore for a few moments the changing nature of the room in which we sit. It may feel solid, but we know there's air molecules moving around in a certain configuration. Just explore that for a moment. Even the floor and the carpet seem solid, but physicists certainly know, again, molecules moving around in a certain configuration. Just get a sense for a moment the changing nature of the room. And what about outside the room? Step outside the room for a moment. Think about cars going by, lights changing, people moving around, the trees, the grass, all the molecules made up of everything that seems solid, and on and on. See if you can really get a sense of that changing nature of all phenomena. So please relax. Slowly open your eyes. It's helpful to start to consider the changing nature of reality, that everything changes. Everything changes. So the most significant change we will have is our death, is when we're passing away. So if we start to experiment first with the changing nature that everything changes, and we're able to work on the small changes that happen in our lives and become relatively peaceful with those, when larger changes happen, we'll be better able to deal with it, to still maintain the mind undisturbed. Thank you. Thanks very much. And then when death comes to a loved one or to yourself, the mind a little bit more practiced in it, a little bit has done the rehearsal many times, and knows that this is a natural course of life. Makes sense? Makes sense, right? So how do you do with small changes? How's it going? Pretty good? Everybody good? Right? People resist change, right? Many people I know don't like it at all. I even hear people I know, like, I don't want anything to change. I hate change, I hear people say. So it's really the only thing you can count on. So I think if we start participating in reality by touching reality, right? By realizing this is its nature, then the mind's more peaceful. What we're trying to do is have the mind more peaceful at death. Okay? Tibetan tradition has, and so that meditation you can do over and over again. There's gross and subtle impermanence. So the gross level of the body, you notice, you swallow, you get an itch, yep, you know, your stomach's grumbling. Got it. And you're like, well, a lot of changes. Subtle ones I'm not really catching, but I'm imagining. You know the body's changing every moment. Okay? We even see with the body. So we have grosser changes. You know, somebody breaks their foot and they're in a cast. And you go, oh, what happened? In a cast, right? But then we have subtle changes. Over time, people have more wrinkles. Their hair turns gray, their hair turns white, their eyesight goes, their hearing goes, their knees hurt, they're walking. I mean, so over time, you see things changing like that. It's natural. It's natural. Okay? We resist and then we suffer. Okay? So you can do that meditation and then think about the mind is always changing. Oh my goodness, right? And then you step outside of that. You know, the room seems solid, but explore. You have to investigate. So please check up everything I'm saying. Please check up. Okay? Don't just believe me, you know, nice maroon robes, bald head. You know, please, you have to investigate. That's what I liked about this path. You investigate. Is that what she's saying? Let me see if that's what it's like in my mind, in my life. And especially if you have any difficulty with change, because then death's going to be hard for you. It's going to be hard. Okay, so Tibetan Buddhism looks at death as a motivator for practice and leading a positive life. And they actually say there's advantages to thinking about death and disadvantages of never considering it. Like that. And the disadvantages are basically that you put your practice off. Not really gonna. I'm gonna do many people. Once I get the kids into school, once I get the house sorted, once I get the job, then I'm gonna practice. Once I sort the relationship stuff, then I'm gonna get to my practice. Put your practice off, okay? Delay, like that. And then even if you do practice, okay, it doesn't have much power, not really invested in it, not really a rich, consistent practice, kind of lacks luster, like that. And then you have a lot of regrets when you die, if you never considered death. A lot of regrets when you die. It's pretty natural. It's like never participating in change that things happen. And you see people when a change happens and they're flattened. But it doesn't have to be that way. I've seen people have really good deaths. And then there's advantages when you think about death. Okay? Kind of wakes you up, you get invested in your practice. And they say it's actually an advantage in the beginning and the middle and the end, they say. Those are three of the reasonings. The beginning, the middle, end. What does that mean? It means that in the beginning of your practice, it invigorates you. So every day I get up and I have some practice during the day, different times of the day. And that kind of reminder about death, I'm like, I got to do my practice today. But it's also important in the beginning of your life because it will motivate you to start orienting your life in the right direction. It's important in the middle of your practice to sustain you over those dry plateaus when you get bored with your practice. It's important in the middle of your life to, again, keep reinvigorated. Keep adjusting your priorities of what's most important. And then you also want to, at the end of your life and the end of your practice. So at the end of your practice is when you're dying, whether it's sudden or whether it's a slow death, old age or a chronic illness. How's your mind? How's your mind? Is it going to be there for me when I'm dying like that? So that's how important it is to consider death, to be prepared for that time. And at the end of life, at the end of your practice, the same. Like that. So those are kind of some things you can slowly look in the Lam Rim books and explore a little bit more in depth to understand there's 6, disadvantages for not thinking about death, 6 advantages thinking about death, like that, to go through, to check up on why is this important. Our culture, a lot of our cultures, people would say it's morbid. Why do you want to think about death? It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable, okay? Well, it will be very uncomfortable at the end of your life if you've never considered it. It'll be more uncomfortable. If you have considered it, you're practicing. See, anytime you rehearse something, you become more familiar. When you're more familiar, it's more comfortable, right? That's what our practice is all about. They call it practice. So some of you play musical instruments. Some of you are good at sports. Some of you just learning how to use your smartphone when you first got it, right? Because you did it again and again, now you're familiar. That's what we're trying to do with a more formal Tibetan Buddhist practice, to make the mind more familiar with what? Virtuous mind states. Peace in the mind. We all want that. We all want that, right? Okay. And then it's there when I'm dying. Okay. Let's look at traditionally the 9-point death meditation. The 9-point death meditation. These are 3 roots, they say, 3 main headings. Under each root are 3 reasonings that convince you of that root, okay? And then it leads you to 3 resolutions. So each section leads you to 3 resolutions to invigorate your practice and to practice well. Okay? So some of you are familiar with these. The 3 main roots, and what you do technically is you try, when you have more time, you meditate on each of the reasonings, 9 reasonings, 9 points, one at a time. Depends how much time you have, but I take 1 a day. So a little more than a week, 1 a day. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, depends on how long you have. It's very powerful. And I'll tell you different types of death meditations, but that's our traditional one. The three main roots. Anybody remember? Number 1. What do you remember? 9-point death meditation. Anybody familiar with this? Some of you know. Number one,
You're going to die.
death is certain. Death is certain. That's number one. Death is certain. I think everybody in here gets that, right? We know intellectually we've got it. We know we're going to die. People say that. That's an understanding. Do you have it here? Where it's a spiritual and an experiential realization. I know I'm going to die. Okay? Then your life starts changing. Then you start reprioritizing some things. Okay? If you've ever been around actively dying people, okay, they have a very different mindset about their lives than people that really don't feel like they're going to die right now. Okay, so number one is death is certain. Second main heading, the time of death is uncertain. The time of death is uncertain. And the third main heading, the only thing that really helps you at the death time, your Dharma practice, your spiritual practice. Okay? So let's look at number one, death is certain. There's three reasonings under this. Three reasonings you would contemplate. A little more slowly, contemplate. Number one, everybody dies. Everybody dies. And they even say there's no power in the universe that will stop death from coming to you. We've got this. I think intellectually we know this. Death is certain, that point. Those three reasonings, they're easier for us to realize. Easier for us to have an experience of. We know we're going to die. Okay? So everybody dies. And what you could do as you contemplate, consider all the people in the world you know of who've died. Personal or famous. And I sometimes think about, the most brilliant people on the planet. Einstein died. He couldn't figure it out. Stephen Hawking, he couldn't figure out a way out of death, right? Other brilliant beings. People have walked on the moon and they still haven't figured out a way out of death. Okay? Scientists, medical practitioners. What about the most powerful people on the planet? Most powerful, have all this power, but no power to stop death from coming. That's interesting. What about the most creative people on the planet? Beethoven, Mozart, John Lennon. All these people, they didn't figure out some creative outlet to get away from death. Rich people can bribe their way out of death? No. So you want to really explore, looks like everybody dies. Everybody dies. Then I think of spiritual people. Gandhi, Jesus, the Buddha died. And you think you're immune from this situation? That's fascinating. The Buddha died. Oh my goodness. What about me? So slowly you want to, you realize everybody dies. Okay. I think we have that. Everybody dies. You'd slowly contemplate, and this contemplation is we would do it analytically. You're analyzing from every angle. Something you read in the book, something you read in a Lam Rim book, a scripture. You might have a verse that you memorize, that something about death that moves you. And then your own consideration, your own life experience, people you know have died. And you come from every angle, again, to move the intellectual realization to this spiritual, experiential realization, where everybody dies. Whoa. Okay. And very deep experience there. When you have that juicy place, I am going to die, I'm definitely going to die, there's nothing I can do. Then you want to take your other type of meditation. These are the two we do in this tradition. Analytical, and then we do placement meditation. You're placing your mind on something to deepen the experience. Sometimes we're working on basic concentration, like calm abiding. Okay? But if I'm practicing the death meditation and I come to this place of I'm going to die, then place your concentration on that experience to deepen it. Okay? Then it will fade. It will fade again. And then you go back and analyze again more quickly to get to that experience. Make sense? Everybody with me? Okay. Second reasoning under death is certain. Every moment we're closer to death. Every moment we are closer to death. Every moment. As if your birth was you got dropped out of an airplane without a parachute. Life is falling. Falling, 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 falling. We're eventually going to hit the ground. That's the end. That's death. Okay? And all these things unfolding around us, but every minute we're closer. Every minute we're closer. We're right now another Thursday closer. Another March closer. Another weekday closer. Another dinner closer. Another Dharma course closer. And on and on and on. Okay? So you'd slowly again contemplate and you can even do this practice in everyday life. You're walking into your office. You're walking into work. I'm another step closer to death. I'm another step closer to death. I'm another budget meeting closer to death. I'm another filing that report closer to death. I'm another filing my taxes closer to death. Play with it. I'm another bite closer. Everything I eat, I'm another bite, another thing of the soup closer to death. You can just take little parts of the day to keep the death awareness there. Right? Why? Because it might motivate me to be kinder to people. It might motivate me to really not be that engaged in that trivial little argument I'm having with somebody, and it's so annoying. Because actively dying people, they don't care about that crap. They really don't. They've let it go. It's not what's interesting when you're actively dying. Why don't we act like it now, but knowing that we're not? Great place to practice from. Okay? Then, another moment closer. Okay. Third reasoning. Under death is certain. Third reasoning. There's very little time to formally practice Dharma. We have very little time. Look at your life. About a third of our life we spend sleeping. That's a third gone. Then look at all the other things. How much time you spent getting educated, working. What about just caring for the body? Feeding it, clothing it, bathing it? How much time do you spend in your relationships? Getting into relationship, having the relationship, maybe some of you getting out of the relationship, right? What about other relationships? Your friends, your family. Look at all the time that's spent on other things other than formal Dharma practice. We're going to die. Death is certain. It's coming. There just isn't much time. Okay, so slowly you contemplate that, and this leads you to a resolution in your mind from these points. I have to practice. I'm going to practice. I'm going to do it. I've got to get something together. Got to get going. Okay? Second main heading. The time of death is uncertain. Second root. Time of death is uncertain. Okay? This is the harder part to realize. The time of death is uncertain. This has three reasonings. The first one is we live on a planet with an unfixed lifespan. People die at all different ages. People die at all different ages. So you'd explore slowly in contemplation all the different ages people are that you know who have died, that you've read about, famous people, whatever. And just look at it, people die 2 years old, people die as a teenager, old age. Sometimes somebody older you thought would die, but it ends up that their younger partner died first. We just had that in our community. Like that. So we have no idea because we have an unfixed lifespan. So you could contemplate that for a while, realizing. And people, unfortunately, we live in denial. And I hear people say, when I'm old, I'm going to do this. When we're old, you don't know. You don't know what comes first. Death or the next breath, right? So the second and third points under this are related. The second and third points related to some degree. The second reasoning is there's many more things contributing to your death than keeping you alive. Many more things contributing to your death. And they actually say there's kind of, in the Tibetan Buddhist system, there's like 84,000 different illnesses, diseases, spirit harm, things that obstruct and interfere with life. Can you imagine? I mean, look right now, we have a new virus. Every few years there's a new virus, like it's a surprise, right? they're probably there kind of moving into other things, and then suddenly the conditions come together and boom, it hits the human population, and then suddenly problems. Like, we've had all kinds of diseases just in our lifetime that we've seen, new diseases that have come up like that. And many things. We also have natural disasters that kill people. There's things like food poisoning, animals that can kill you, poisonous plants, infections, bacterias, viruses, accidents, environmental toxins, war, famine. I mean, so many things out there that kill you. Okay? So you slowly would explore. It's not all that pleasant, and some of the death meditation, when it's actually going well, when it's going, saying quotes, when it's going well, but to some degree, is it does bring your mind down a little bit. It's perfectly natural to be a little bit depressed when you're doing death meditation. Okay? And it's also a counter to pride. If you're arrogant, haughty, if you suffer from that, prideful, feeling you're more superior to others, one of the ways to bring yourself down is meditate on death. Like that. For the opposite is if you suffer from depression and anxiety, the antidote is meditate on that you have a precious human rebirth, beginning of the Lam Rim in a sense. Okay, so each of these meditations, they have an effectiveness based on what your mind's doing at any given time. They're all very, very effective. And this is a path of getting to know your mind so you know what to apply at a certain time, what antidote based on the meditations. And that works to make your mind more flexible, more peaceful, more spacious, and then more compassionate so we can help others as much as possible. Like that. Okay. Third reasoning under the second heading, the time of death is uncertain. The third reasoning is the body is very delicate. The body's very delicate. So it's, in an earthquake, if you're outside, you really aren't going to get killed if you're in the woods. The trees move, everything moves. The problem is when a building falls down on your head, because those materials of the building and the pressure and things is stronger than the body. Okay? People go into the hospital with a minor thing, and they end up on a respirator with hospital pneumonia or an infection that they didn't go into the hospital with. And then that's a little stronger than the body, and they die. Like they're noting that the people dying of the coronavirus, obviously older people and people with suppressed immune systems. They're not strong enough to fight it off. There's some people that are strong enough. There's a large majority strong enough, but some people are not like that. It's common. I had a cousin who went in the hospital for surgery to remove benign polyps in his colon. This happens for people. It's common. Benign polyps in his colon. He didn't have cancer. They may have developed into cancer, but he didn't have cancer yet. But the doctor was like, we need to take them out so they don't develop into cancer. He died on the operating table. Right? Complications. Something happened. His heart stopped. People get infections. People eat the wrong food and then the body suddenly can't deal with it. Body's very delicate. It's a delicately balanced thing. I remember my father was living in an assisted living center, older people, right? And the flu, in a bad flu season, 2 years ago he was there, and a flu came through the building, right? And what they did is they closed down his building. I couldn't visit him. And he couldn't go to the next building, where sometimes he'd meet people over there. They all had to stay there contained until this passed, which they're doing now with the coronavirus as well. But it seemed kind of extreme, but because it's an older population, it was making, nobody died, but people were really sick like that. So and he had to stay in his room for a while where they delivered the food to him. He couldn't go to the dining room where they'd eat together because everybody was spreading it. Okay? Makes sense. Body's very delicate, can't fight those things off. So these three reasonings, under the time and death is uncertain, leads us to a resolution that not only from the first resolution, I'm going to practice, I'm dead set on practicing, right? But number 2 is I am going to practice now. There's not much time. I don't know when I'm going to die. I am going to practice now. Third root is the only thing that benefits you at the death time is your spiritual practice, your Dharma practice. So there's three reasonings under this. This is really what the easiest point to understand is that the only thing that really helps you is your Dharma practice. So the first one is your possessions. Do they help you when you're dying? What do you think? Okay. I've been with some really wealthy people when they're dying, and they had every possibility in their home. They wanted to die at home. They had round-the-clock care, really good care, the hospital bed they wanted, and the special tub, and the this and that, and they were absolutely miserable. So if the mind's not peaceful, it doesn't matter what you're going to do with your possessions. Also, some people get very attached to their possessions when they're dying. And there may be family members in the room fighting over their possessions while they can still hear. Like that. Very unpleasant. You can't take those possessions with you. And I think about not just possessions. I like to think that first point, under this heading, that the only thing that benefits you at the death time is your Dharma practice, is what doesn't benefit you is your position and your possessions. We have an identity caught up with who we think we are. My job, my position in the family, my importance in the community, I'm famous, people like me, I do, all of that, that's gone when you die. And most people just end up tormented of, I'm losing all of that. Number two, under this, second reasoning, your family and your friends. What do you think about them? Do they help you when you're dying? Your family and friends. What do you think? It's a little more controversial point here. Some people are going like this, some people aren't sure. Okay. If your family and friends are aware of your spiritual practice, and you've left detailed instructions, we're going to talk about that a little later. You've left detailed instructions. These are my practices. I have a memory stick. All my practices are on that, recorded how I like to do them. So I don't have to hear somebody's grating voice doing them for me when I'm dying. I know when to pause. I know when I want to meditate. Okay, so all people have to do is plug that into some device and put the earphones on. And I'm set. Okay? I don't know if I'll be set, but at least that's a big advantage to have that. Because people are around you, they may not know what you want. They may be talking to you about Jesus, but you're a Buddhist. It's happened. When I go to see people, I always ask the family, what's their belief system? Do they have any belief system? What are they familiar with? What makes them feel comforted? Like that. You don't want to start somebody foisting on you, believe this or do this. Okay? So family and friends get confused, they get scared, they're uncomfortable. They're freaked out that they're losing you, they're afraid you might be in pain. That torments them more, let alone yourself. Okay? So sometimes they're around you begging you not to die. I've heard this. They're going to fall apart without you. Please don't leave me. I need you. They're crying. They're distraught. It's not helpful for you. If they're around you reminding you of your practice in a balanced way, doing practices around you, recommended perhaps by a teacher of yours, that's helpful. Okay? But your dying experience is yours alone. Nobody's going with you. You're leaving all of them. And sometimes you have a lot of attachment to them. So you're hanging on. Like that. Okay? So the last one is your body is of no help to you when you're dying. It's usually the reason you're dying. No longer supporting. Like that. Okay? So you'd explore those 3 points, which are easier to realize, and you come to a conclusion from the first resolution. Not only am I going to practice, second resolution, I'm going to practice now. Third resolution, I'm going to practice well. So that's what's going to be there for me when I'm dying. Okay, 9-point death meditation. That's the traditional approach in our tradition, Tibetan Buddhists. And then what Tibetan Buddhism says is there's 8 stages of the death process once the breathing has stopped. Once the breathing has stopped. Some of it happens before the breathing has stopped. But we're talking about things get more subtle. So let me explain a little bit of what Tibetan Buddhism says about your body and mind. They exist on 3 different levels: a gross level, a subtle level, and a most subtle level. Your body and mind. Gross, subtle, most subtle. Okay? The body is supported by what we would say wind energy that's physical in nature, and that makes physical things like your body. Wind energy. So for instance, in the Chinese system, they call it qi. In the Hindu Ayurvedic system, prana. Tibetan system, they call it lung, wind. Okay? And the wind has an ability in its most subtle form that it allows, it's like a life force, okay? And it allows the fertilization to take place. So the sperm and egg come together, let's say human form, and we know that they're physical because you can look under a microscope and see them. That's been proven. And that's absolutely the basis and what creates your body, the sperm and the egg. The egg gets fertilized, and they say that what allows that fertilization to take place is this most subtle wind. Most subtle wind. Physical in nature creates something physical, your body. Okay? Then what about the mind? Okay, but let's first look at this most subtle wind. Then the most subtle wind, the fetus starts developing. We know the cells start replicating. Okay? And then like the head bud comes out and the brain starts forming, and then there's arm buds, and then the limbs, and then all the organs start getting clarified and developing. Okay. And they say that as that starts happening and developing, these winds, they get less subtle. So they have upward moving winds. Subtle upward moving winds. Not most subtle, subtle. And subtle downward voiding winds. So when I say subtle, we're not really aware of them. Okay, so upward moving winds right now allow me to speak, turn my head, blink my eyes, cry, chew food, swallow, breathe. All done by upward, subtle, upward moving winds. Downward voiding winds, also subtle, because we're not really aware of them, allow you to walk, sit down, go to the bathroom, digest food, have sexual orgasm. Downward voiding subtle winds. And then we move into gross wind. The baby comes out and cries. And you hear that. Here's a gross wind. You hear it, you see my body, you see kind of expansion, contraction, gross wind. Okay, so we have gross, subtle, most subtle. That supports the body. Then the mind, gross, subtle, most subtle. Okay, so they say the mind in its most subtle experience, clear light nature. That's the most subtle experience of the mind. Clear, it's clear light nature. What does that mean? The most luminous experience you could have, okay, in a non-physical form. Tibetan Buddhism, the mind's not the brain. It's not physical. The brain is physical. The mind is not. Okay? But the mind in its most subtle experience has this unique way of mounting the most subtle wind, that original life force, okay, like a rider on a horse. Okay, and then they are attached, but they're separate. One is non-physical, mind. One is physical, the body, that creates a body. But they have a unique way of being together, always. But they say it is the most subtle mind that contains all your karmic imprints or propensities or seeds, okay, that dictates how that body is going to develop and how that life will be. It's all dictated by the mind, like that. Whether you'll be deformed, whether you'll be brilliant, whether you'll be rich, whether you'll be successful at university, whether you'll be an engineer, whether you'll be a doctor, whether you'll be a teacher, all dictated by the karmic imprints in the most subtle mind. Okay? How do they get there, those imprints? Based on past activities of your body, speech, and mind. Like that. So it's something when you can do a meditation on the continuity of consciousness, you start to see a connectivity through various periods of your life. That one moment of mind, which they say is what makes up the consciousness, one moment of mind or consciousness has a moment before that preceded it that caused it. And that particular moment has a moment before that caused it, and a moment before that caused it, and a moment before. There will always be, according to Tibetan Buddhism, a preceding moment of consciousness that caused it. You can never find a first moment of mind. There's never a first moment, and also each subsequent moment is a result of the previous moment. And that result becomes the cause of the next moment. And that becomes the cause of the next moment. So again, the mind goes on without any end. They say beginningless, endless mind. It's a continuum. It's very hard for a lot of people to conceive of that, but it's a continuum. So if you even want to go back to the first moment of mind at conception, Tibetan Buddhism would say, but even that moment would have a previous moment of mind that caused it. And that would indicate a past life. A past life. So if you want to go on, when you're dying, actively dying, and finally the respiration ceases, we would then say the person is clinically dead. There's one last exhalation, rumbles out. There's no more inhalation. And that's usually in our system where the pulse stops, we say they're dead, they died. Tibetan Buddhism says there's a whole inner experience that goes on. Okay? And actually what happens is the different subtle winds, because the gross wind has ended, has ceased. Now the subtle winds start dissolving and everything dissolves into the heart center. So the upward voiding winds start coming down, certain configuration. There's certain signs of them dissolving into the heart center. Not the organ, the heart, a subtle energy system located around the heart center, around your core. Downward voiding winds begin coming up. And this isn't, again, in an ideal death, when there's time, slowly. In a more sudden death, suicide, car accident, heart attack, they will all happen more quickly. But everything ends up coming up generally into the heart center, above, down, from below up, right, that. And then there's subtle visions that appear. Subtle visions that will appear to your consciousness. So as a meditator, you're going to be doing these visions throughout the day, and they come up in tantric practice. His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, I think he does them about 6 or 8 times a day because they're in various practices. And the reason he does them over and over is to familiarize his mind with the subtle visions so he can recognize them because they conclude in the clear light. And you're trying not to miss the clear light. When you can meditate on the clear light and recognize it more and more through the meditations, then you're meditating on emptiness in that moment, the nature of reality, to try to actualize more highly realized states. And you can do that in the moment from when the death has stopped. And they talk about some great meditators that remain in meditation after the breathing has stopped. And it can be, I think, up to 3 weeks or so, where the body is not decaying because the consciousness is still there doing the meditation. Eventually, when the meditation ceases, and if you're a high meditator, you can control when it ceases. You know, you're possibly directing your next rebirth of where it would go. So you're controlling that system. The meditation ceases, and then the consciousness leaves the body. It leaves this form, which is decaying, and it goes into what's considered an in-between state. A bardo. Bardo is a Sanskrit word for in-between. It's a transition. It's a transition. We have many transitions in life. That's why I said first, look at the changes. Look at your changes. How are you with small transitions right now? You're moving apartments. Your kid goes off to school. You change jobs. How do you do? A friend cancels lunch. Are you okay with that? Some people aren't. That's minor. It's a small thing, okay? So slowly. So then what happens is the most subtle mind goes into this bardo being's body, which is more subtle. So there's still some kind of life force there, but in a more subtle way. And it's a bardo being's body, they say, can traverse through walls, but all the intent of that bardo being, that transition, is you're catapulted as an ordinary being, meaning you have no control, and you're catapulted looking for the next rebirth, looking for the causes and conditions that will line up for you to take rebirth. The causes and conditions are contained in your most subtle consciousness, most subtle mind, based on all the activities you've done with your body, speech, and mind. Okay? And they're setting up like a contract for you that dictates uncontrollably what kind of rebirth I'm going to take. As a highly realized being, you control where you take rebirth. That would be great. Then you could pick a good rebirth. And so what we're trying to do now is make positive imprints, as many positive imprints as we can, so that what we're setting up, if you believe in this, is better and better rebirths, where I can do more Dharma practice and get myself out of the cycle of suffering, samsara, and become free. And then become ultimately free and become a Buddha, which simply means fully awakened being, because then you're unlimited in helping all living beings. So just to give you a process of that. So they say basically when everything dissolves into the heart center, there's an indestructible drop. Inside the indestructible drop is contained most subtle mind mounted on most subtle wind. Okay? And eventually the body, no more sustaining, the meditation's over, the indestructible drop opens, and the consciousness, they say, leaves the body. How does it leave? Well, it's not physical, okay, but they say sometimes there is a physical sign of the consciousness leaving. We've never noticed this before, so we don't look so much. They say a fluid will leave from a certain orifice of the body. Depending on the orifice that it leaves indicates whether it will be a good rebirth or a bad rebirth. So they say if it leaves from lower orifices of the body, and it could be like a half a cup of a milky liquid, it could indicate a negative rebirth. If it leaves from an upper opening of the body, like the eyes or something like that, it could indicate a positive rebirth, a good rebirth like a human, perhaps, like that. Again, we're not usually aware of what's happening when the person has died. We're not looking for those signs necessarily. But once you're aware of them, you may, if you're with a high meditator, you may notice something like that, or if you're with an ordinary person, you may notice something like that. So in our tradition, when you're actually taking care of someone who's dying, we try not to touch the body other than stimulating the crown to draw the consciousness up, so it leaves through an upper opening. Don't blame yourself if you were rubbing somebody's feet, giving them a massage or holding their hand, or, we didn't know. But now that you know, it's better. And sometimes you can just rub the person's, if they're lying in a bed, I've just rubbed somebody's crown or sit. Nobody knows what I'm doing. I have a little death kit with some substances that I can put on the crown and things that Rinpoche's given me to do. And people don't know, you're just, so that's kind of nicer to not touch the body, they say, if it's possible, like that. Obviously once the breathing has stopped, sometimes people are making preparation to remove the body. So what we do as Buddhists, just as far as care, what we do as Buddhists is to do a number of different prayers and practices right next to the person's body. I've done that for my parents. I've done it for some other practitioners. It may be a few hours until I feel like we've concluded. And then sometimes and Geshe Dakpa, who is the Lama who teaches in this area, is wonderful. He's an astrologer, and I consulted him, especially with my mother, Rinpoche's advice, to then call him when you want to remove the body from the room. So before the caretaker was coming to conclude all these practices, and I delayed the caretaker, I didn't call them until I was ready to have them come, and they were quite a distance away, like an hour, but I knew they'd come right away as soon as I called. So I was like, I'm not going to call them yet because they always show up early, and then I wanted to make sure I was done. And then I called Geshe-la, and then Geshe-la went through with me. Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you? And when I said yes, I did all those things. And then he said, okay, you can remove the body. And I said, is there a direction? And he said, no, it's fine now. You can have them come and take the body out like that. So that's a nice thing we could do. We also have a new, I don't have it with me. Maybe they have it here. There's a death book. Sounds funny, a death book. It's a red book, a new book that has come out a couple of years ago, Rinpoche's advice. There's more material on death and dying on the FPMT website than anything else. Maybe that and depression, how to deal with depression. This is Rinpoche. He knows, how we suffer or what we need. And so this book, it's about this thick. It's great. Get a copy of that. And then you have all the practices, all the information. Rinpoche gives a whole preemptor in the beginning of what to think about, all the things I'm talking about, how to get ready on a spiritual level, and then how to get ready on a practical level. And then all the prayers and practices are contained within. And all you need is that book, and you show up at somebody's bedside if they're a Buddhist, if they want that, if they're familiar, if it's something you feel to do, because my parents were not Buddhists, but they were fine with me doing that. And then you do your best and you read through. And some of the things you may not be familiar, you just read in English. Sometimes there's mantras. You say them as best as you can. Good enough. You try your best. Like that. It's really helpful. And you'll notice for your mind, you'll be like, wow, I could do something. Could do something. People kind of freak out. So it's like, nope, I've got something I can do. It's the best. This is, from a great Lama. These are some of the practices like that. Okay. These 8 stages, what tends to show up with the subtle mind, these 8 stages we meditate on. If you have tantric practices, you're meditating on these in your practices. Like I said, His Holiness doing 6 or 8 times a day. Okay, just to give you a little walk through these visions, what happens? Okay, subtle mind. The winds are dissolving. Okay, and you first get a vision of the earth element of your body is dissolving. The first thing that dissolves, your earth element is dissolving. And they'll say, this may happen before you stop breathing. Person feels leaden. They can't move, and they may feel like they're being buried under a heap of earth. Okay? And you see this with people. They can't lift their head anymore. It's very common. You see somebody like slowly dying, can no longer lift their head. They can't lift their limbs. They're very weak. It's very common. Earth element is dissolving. You even see it with old people, the gravity, how they move slowly, just because the earth element's dissolving. Like that. So the first vision that comes at this point is a mirage-like image to your mind. It's something that appears to your mind, a mirage-like image. People might say, I see water around me. Like that. The water that's not there, I see water around me. Okay? That's a sign this earth element is dissolving. The next vision is the water element dissolves, and this is where the fluids start to dry up in the body. Okay? Fluid starts to dry up, and what will appear to the consciousness, it's an internal appearance, the mind merged with this experience, is there will be a smoke, like you're in a smoke-filled room. Smoke-filled room. Like blue-gray smoke is your whole experience. And what you do in meditation is slowly meditate on these visions. Again, why? To familiarize your mind. Because these visions happen every time you fall asleep. When you go into more subtle mind, they happen if you have a big sneeze or a big yawn, and when you have sexual orgasm. They actually happen. Do you recognize them? If you're not going to recognize them now, you will not recognize them probably at the death time. So we meditate on them to get the mind more familiar, so you can recognize the clear light. The next thing that happens is the fire element dissolves in the body, and that's when digestion ceases. The heat starts to go from the body. Usually it ends up here in the heart. Everything's moving into the heart center, where the most subtle mind is. Okay? And so the heat goes, and you have an internal vision of fire, like a fireflies in the night sky. Or like you're over a big campfire and sparks our spark-like image, and that's your whole experience. More subtle mind, like that. Then you have the air element dissolving. And what appears to the this is usually when the respiration ends, okay? And what appears to the consciousness is the glow around a candle, flickering glow around a candle before it's about to go out. That's your whole experience. And then you get into the more subtle visions that appear. So there becomes as the substances start to come, the subtle wind down from the crown, you get a white milk, what do they say, white appearance, like a full moon over a harvest field. So this is not the clear light, it's a milky kind of white experience, white appearance they call it. Then the most subtle winds are coming up from below up to the heart center, and then you get a red increase, like a brilliant magenta, orange, red sunset. Like that. That's your whole experience. Then everything joins, the two merge at the heart center, and there's almost like a dead faint. Black as black can be is the vision, the internal vision. Black near attainment, they call it. Why near attainment? You're nearly at the clear light. Okay? And then the clear light dawns. And then again, you try to hold your consciousness, try to hold your concentration on that experience, most luminous, pure experience of the most subtle mind, as long as you can, and then meditating on emptiness. If you have some experience of that now in your life, and you know how to meditate on emptiness, you've done classes on emptiness, read some things on emptiness, then you'd want to meditate on it there. Again, to actualize more highly realized states. Like that. And then finally that ends, indestructible drop opens, and the consciousness leaves the body in a more subtle form, a bardo being, looking for the next rebirth. Then when it finds the rebirth, okay, that again, most subtle mind mounted on most subtle wind, comes into in a let's say female womb like that, and then those visions reverse. Okay? Then they all reverse, and then the mind gets more gross, and then finally the baby is developing like that. Okay? Any questions about that? Anything I've said so far?
So when you said that the consciousness goes into the other body, when the consciousness goes into the other body, does it start with the sperm and the egg, or can it go just before the birth of
Well,
the baby?
right at the moment of the fertilization, they say, then the bardo being's body can enter with the most subtle mind mounted there. Like that. Right at the moment of conception. Yeah.
Thank you, Venerable. You said when you get the milky substance, like vision coming down and the red...
Or the white
up.
increase.
Yeah.
The white appearance.
Yeah.
Yeah, would be the most subtle winds making their way down to the heart. Red increase coming up from below.
Is it just color that you're trying to...
I'll put it this way. It's an
contemplate?
inner vision of what you'd imagine of like looking across an empty field with a big full moon rising. That kind of white appearance.
Not the field and not the moon, but what's in
Yeah.
between. Okay.
That color, basically. You try to experience that color as much as possible when you're first imagining it,
Okay.
until you actually see it. With higher level Buddhist practices, what they call completion stage practices of Tantra, you first need a proper initiation, but then through working with the subtle energy system, you can actualize those visions so that you really experience them like that. Otherwise, we're just imagining. But you try to imagine, at least like that.
But we're more thinking about the color itself, not some specific image that we're supposed to be thinking
No, more the
about.
color. I would say
Okay.
more the color like that. Yeah. But if you think of a brilliant sunset and that gets you into that color, that could be helpful
Okay.
like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much, Venerable Amy, for this clear instructions. When your friend passes away and say there's no milky white substance coming out of any of the orifices, how many days later can you touch him or move his body?
Yeah, good question. I'm going to get into that in a moment, but basically, so let me just, so the visions, 8 stages of death process, and then generally it takes up to 3 days for the consciousness to leave the body according to the Tibetan tradition. The consciousness can leave more quickly, and usually in the case of a sudden death, it will leave more quickly, okay? But it can be up to 3 days. After 3 days, the consciousness will leave. It's rare, I think. And so what happens is until it leaves, interestingly enough, the body doesn't decay, doesn't show signs of decay. Once the consciousness leaves, the body will start smelling. Insects might come, and then you'll see signs of decay. So that could be a sign if the body, and I saw somebody in hot India who died, and a holy being, and we were there sitting like a vigil, and no signs of decomposition until the consciousness left, like 2.5 days later. So often you may, if you're a Buddhist, practicing Buddhist, you'd like to be in touch with a high lama, somebody that would know, somebody with higher realizations that could advise, that will tell you maybe what practices to do, or when to remove the body, or that it's okay, or they may be doing their own practice around the person if they have a connection with the person, even if they're not there, like that. But it's nice because of this death book, now it's all explained what you can do. And I know that the teachers, especially like Rinpoche, they're trying to make us independent so that we're not just relying on them. Like, let's take control of our own practice and start to actualize some realizations and know what to do, like that. Sure. And then, so with reincarnation, Tibetan Buddhism talks about reincarnation. I know not everyone believes that, but there are there's this intermediate state, the bardo, and then there could be other forms that you can take in other realms you can go to other than human. So again, human realm is optimum for getting enlightened. You have a balance of suffering and leisure. The suffering motivates you to practice, and the leisure affords you the space to practice, the space and time, like that. There's God realms, 2 God realms that are technically higher than us as humans. These 3 realms make up the upper realms: human, jealous God realm, and a hedonistic God realm. It sounds like the God realms could be pretty good, a lot of pleasure, but too much pleasure and no incentive to practice. So it's not helpful, and they use up a lot of positive conditions in those realms. They're not enlightened realms at all. Usually they use up positive conditions and end up taking a lower rebirth. Lower realms, we have the animal realm as the top of the lower realms. Then we have a hungry ghost realm, preta in Sanskrit. And the lowest realm is a hell realm. So they do have hell realms in Buddhism. However, there's a whole variety of hell realms, not just like the Catholic hell realms where you're burning forever. We give you a whole variety of hot and cold hell realms, just, for your surfing pleasure. And obviously what creates the rebirth in the hell realm would be horrible things like sadistic killing. It makes sense. If you're creating incredible suffering and torture for people, that could create the condition for you to take rebirth in a suffering, torturous place. However, you're not there forever. In Buddhism, you're simply there until you exhaust the karmic conditions that got you there. When you exhaust them, you move out of that realm. Like that. When you purify through the suffering in that realm, you move out of that realm. Hungry ghost realm could be created. It's a grasping spirit realm, and it's created by intense desire and dissatisfaction and grasping. Okay? The animal realm is created by a phenomenal amount of laziness and ignorance, like that. Now, I know people are going to debate about my dog is the most intelligent dog on the planet. How can you say? Now, our pets are the very peak, the 0.5% of the animal realm at the top of the pyramid. Okay? Most animals live in the sea. And you really have to thoroughly check up on these realms, and you do some meditations on them slowly that really motivates you to realize you have a precious human rebirth. So let's use it. Let's use our rebirth well. Everybody that got in this room, thank you. It's fantastic. You have every perfect opportunity to practice right now. Don't waste it. Please don't waste it. There's people suffering on the planet that need our help. So we've got to get ourselves free, but along the way, we're going to try to help people as much as we can. When you become a Buddha, then you can really help unlimitedly. So we have to use this time because it's pretty rare and will be difficult to get again. So you have to explore the animal realm, and most animals, I said, live in the sea. The insect realm is vast, but look at the animal realm. Analyze. Look at the animals. They're eating. They're killing to eat. Some of them. They eat in utter fear, mostly, right? They are sleeping, going to the bathroom, and making more animals. That's basically the animal realm. I don't see any animals in this room interested in knowing what the death process is in Tibetan Buddhism. I don't see them reading books. Even your intelligent dog or cat that brings you a lot of comfort, and you think it's really cool to be your dog or cat and they get to sleep all day and you have to go to work, check again. Please check up. Okay, so those are some different realms you can end up in. Okay, practice is to do at the death time, and I want to talk about some practical things now. And I want to give you the easiest death meditation to do is, I do this every morning. I try to do this every morning after I have a little precious human rebirth, succulence of my incredible life, right? We all have problems, myself included, right? This is not a perfect situation. We have it pretty good. I don't know all of your stories, but just looking around the room, we have food, clothing, and shelter. We are not living in a war-torn place. You may have a relatively healthy body and mind, and we have relatively clean air to breathe and relatively good water to drink right out of the tap, electricity, ease of life, a good family and friends, and on and on. Unbelievable luxury, what we have. This. So I have a little succulence of that in the morning in bed. As I wake up, I'm like, okay, everything seems to be working again. I get another day, and I get another day. Tonight, at 6 o'clock tonight, it's over. This is my last day. Okay, I use that as a motivator. And then I set my motivation. If this is my last day, what I'd like to do is make the most meaning of the day. I'd like to be happy. I'd like to be calm on my last day. I'd like to be clear. I'd like to be focused on helping others on my last day, if I could. Right? So then I set a motivation from there. Can I use my body, speech, and mind today? Can I direct my body, speech, and mind as much as I can? I know I'm going to forget. Sometimes I'm going to lapse. I'm a human being. I'm not perfect. But directing me to Buddhahood, getting enlightened. Why? So I can benefit all living beings. Purpose is to benefit all living beings. Then I get out of bed. Then with that motivation, you brush your teeth. With that motivation, you have your coffee. With that motivation, you get dressed. You have a shower. You go to work. Some motivation, but that succulence of, this is my last day. Okay, this is my last day. People say, oh, you're creating your own death. Oh my God, don't say that. I'm still here, right? You know how many years I've been doing this meditation? I'm still here, okay? So it's my last day. You drive to work. How many of you drive to work? Okay, or you drive, right? Okay, traffic irritates people. It's your last time you're going to be in traffic. How do you want to drive? Spacious? Considering others? Sending them love and happiness, and may you be happy, may you be free of suffering, or giving people the finger? Being rude and aggressive and kind of get out of my way. It's the last time you're going to drive. What do you want on your consciousness? It's the last time you're going to see the difficult person in your life. Can you not have a little patience? It may be the last time you see them. But even if I practice that, this could be my last day, could be my last day. One day it will be your last day. If you've rehearsed it, okay, that's right. I remember. I thought about this before. I thought about this. Well, here it is. It's coming. Okay. If I never thought about it, what a shock it's going to be. Oh my God. This is it. They told me I'm dying. They told me I have 6 months to live. Oh my God. But it's kind of like, yeah, I knew this was going to come. I knew this was going to come, and this is how it's going to come, or it looks like it could come this way. So we're a little bit more practical, a little bit more relaxed about it. Just a little bit more touching reality. Okay, that makes the mind more peaceful. Make sense? We try our best. So that's the easiest death meditation. Today's my last day. How do I want to show up? A little more spacious, a little kinder. Wouldn't you want to be kind on your last day? So those little trivial things with people. This person's annoying you, that thing, doesn't mean you don't assert yourself with something. You need to still fight for your budget or be clear with somebody. You know, that's okay, but there's certain things that you might be like, I don't need to fight over. Like, it doesn't matter. Those kind of things. A little more gentle in the space. Here's from, this is an older book, Facing Death and Finding Hope. There's so many books about death and dying, starting with, thank you, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who broke open the whole let's talk about death thing in the 60s with her book on death and dying. Something Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was one of the first ones that started to get us talking about it. And even she died. Okay? So Christine Longacre wrote a book later called Facing Death and Finding Hope. I really like this book. And in there's 4 tasks of living and dying. Very practical. 4 tasks of living and dying. Okay, number 1, understanding and transforming suffering. Okay, this involves, and this is a little bit when I mentioned impermanence, coming to accept that suffering and problems are a natural, inevitable part of life, and learning ways of coping better with problems. Learning to cope again with small problems, those small changes I mentioned. You get pretty practice with that and you're able to deal with that, then big problems when they come. You lose somebody. Break up in a long-term relationship or when you're facing your own death. Okay, then you're able to cope better, have better coping mechanisms as you go through the bigger problems such as your death, that you're dying. Number 2, making a connection, healing relationships and letting go. This is about, right now, communicating openly, compassionately, skillfully with everybody in your life, especially family and friends, especially those closest to us. And please clear up any unresolved problems that we may have with any of them as soon as you can. I've been with people, I haven't talked to my brother in 5 years, I hate him. Or they're trying to now reconcile with the person they haven't spoken to in 5 years. We place a phone call, the person doesn't want to talk to them, and they're dying. Clean it up now if you can. You can also clean up things in your own mind even if the other person has died, and you can find resolution through meditation like that. Number 3, we've already mentioned, cultivating a spiritual practice. That's the thing that will be there when you're dying. That's the thing that will layer some buoyancy and support for your mind. Number 4, really important, finding meaning in life. Finding meaning in life. And I would ask you to please don't wait any longer to find meaning in life. Doesn't matter how old you are. But figure out what is the thing that ignites you inside, that lights you up. I'm talking about deep inner contentment. Are you experiencing that at times in your life now? If you are, can you move yourself more in that direction? That this is where I want my life to go. Fortunately, I found out, after working in politics, thinking that was a way to bring about positive change on the planet. That's why I'm a nun now, right? Okay. You explore. I tried things. Wanted to help people. Worked for the homeless. I worked with an AIDS hospice in San Francisco during the peak of the AIDS epidemic. So trying to help people, and then I felt really limited and really frustrated, and I got really angry. Then I found the Dharma. And then I realized that I'm doing all this external work, but I didn't have any real internal resource to do it from. So with some internal work of a formal meditation practice, I could help to calm down some of the frustration, and reorient myself in reality and realize you can't fix everything. And you know what? I can't control people. The only thing I can control is my mind. And I realized I couldn't even control my mind. So why don't I first try to control my mind meaning my attitude and my responses to things, and get more peace in my mind, my internal work, and then my external work, that's going to be informed by that. And then better external work, because I'm coming from a more peaceful, gentle, compassionate place. And that seemed to make the external work, no matter how frustrating it could be, but work out in a better way and help me be able to help more people. So when I determined that and wanted to move into the Dharma and saw that there was a benefit in that, and then helping serving centers and running centers and teaching Dharma and stuff, then it really lit me up. And then I just started to move my life in that direction. And it was tricky because in the beginning, living at Land of Medicine Buddha for a couple of months in the 90s, and then I lived for 3 years at Seichen Ling's center, our San Francisco center, in Venerable Carol's house. She gave me a small room in the basement for free, and I could just pay utilities. And doing that, I didn't have much money. And I gave up my career, and suddenly I'm in this situation, and my friends and family are like, what are you doing? But in here, I knew this is where I needed to be. When I went to sleep at night, I felt good. I felt like this is exactly, I'm in sync. But it doesn't mean that it's easy and without problems. But I stuck with it, made that turn that corner, a little bit challenging in the turn of the corner, and now I never looked back. It's just, our centers were more thriving. We made them places you could work and make a living wage and develop these centers and really help a lot of people and hold these retreats and then slowly, great. I just feel like I'm doing the most meaning I can do right now. You adjust things too. Different priorities. Like I was running centers for a long time. Now I'm teaching full time, more and more doing that. And it may change back. Things are always changing, but I know this is the direction I want to go, and I'm happy about that. And I feel like it's putting me in a place where I find one of the things that lends meaning is, are you helping other beings? That seems to be a key for me. Please check your own life. If there's something not working, you can adjust it. You're not stuck in it forever. But be careful. You might tell yourself stories, and make excuses. I can't do this because of my husband. I can't do this because of... You can do anything. You can do anything. Discuss it with the people around you. Make small adjustments. Check your priorities. Are they in alignment with what lights you up inside? What makes you deeply content? Does that make sense? Does everybody know what I'm talking about? So finding meaning in life, it will really help you be peaceful when you're dying. Let's talk about some practical things. Okay, our tradition. First of all, please get your paperwork together. Get your paperwork together. You will feel better, okay? Some people have a regular will. You have property, your money, whatever you're going to leave. Have a regular legal will. Get that done because it'll save your family a lot of hassle if you don't have it, okay? And then you have a living will. This is a living will. This is available in all kinds of countries, five wishes. You can download this from the internet, okay? And what it does is it's your wish for the person I want to make care decisions when I can't. Are you clear about that person? Have you discussed it with them? Are they in alignment with what you want? This gives you specifics. Number 2, the kind of medical treatment I want or don't want. Do you know what, have you been around dying people? Do you want a feeding tube? Do you want to be on a respirator? Those situations can last a long time. Is that what you want if you're brain dead? So you can have very specific things in here. How comfortable you want to be is another one. How I want people to treat me and what I want my loved ones to know. Okay, and you can just fill it in this document, and it gives you, and it tells you it is legal in the state of California, and it gives you very specific things. So I'll give you an example. What does life support treatment mean to me? And it talks about different things, and then and it leaves you blank spaces, so you fill in specifics you want, or you just cross out from the list. Here's a list. In a coma, I'm in a coma and I'm not expected to wake up or recover. Okay, so the doctors have told whoever's taking care of me that, and then I have things here. If that's the case, I want life support treatment. You check that box. Okay, I do not want life support treatment. If it's been started, I want it stopped. Then check that box. I want to have life support treatment if my doctor believes it could help. But I want my doctor to stop giving me life support treatment if it's not helping my health or symptoms. Very specific. Or blank spaces. Write in what you want. So it really goes through the whole thing of permanent severe brain damage, close to death, in another condition. What I want my loved ones to know. People have trouble maybe saying things to loved ones. Some people aren't so forthcoming that way. That's okay. They have all kinds of things here you can say. I think you finish it, you can get it notarized. It's a legal document and it goes with your will. And what I would do, and there's a witness statement, and you get some witnesses, they sign, notarization, what you do after you've completed it. And what I would do is make 2 or 3 copies and give them to 2 or 3 people you trust and say to them, this is my death pack. Will you take care of this? Are you comfortable to do it? Some people go, no, I don't want that responsibility. I'm actually planning to move to the other side of the country. I'm not going to. And even if you do take it and then you move, like I had to say to somebody, do you still want me to hold on to this? Because now we live across the country from each other. I will try to fly in for you, but make sure there's somebody near you that has it as well so that they're right there. 'Cause it's going to take me a while to get in. Do you still want me to have your kit? And they're like, yeah, I do. Okay, so I've got it. I know what I need to do. But have some people closer. They may not be family to you because your family wants something different and they may not want to honor the thing, but it is a legal document. Okay, so you can have that, and you can have, like for me, the memory stick is in the sets. So my prayers are there with a thing of listed my prayers on a piece of paper, so people know what it is. And what I haven't done yet is put the actual what are those prayers in case somebody doesn't have them. But usually Buddhist practitioners would be able to find those and go, I know, I've got that practice. I'll do that for her or something. I know people out of surgery, they had people doing the practices and you can't speak or anything. So people would sit and do the practice out loud to you. It's really helpful if you're a practitioner and you want that, like that. So do get the paperwork together and make sure there's possibly some discussion with those 2 or 3 closest people to you, that it's not just later you give it to them and don't discuss it, but make sure they're comfortable to do this. If you say to somebody, I want to be cremated, and that's not their tradition, will they be comfortable to honor that? Or insist that you have to have a casket and be buried like that? And be reasonable. Be reasonable. If you live overseas and you live far away from your family that you want to take care of things, or the cemeteries across the country, do you really want them to have to transport your body? Or if you're on a trip, I'm supposed to be leading this Laudo pilgrimage, commercial break. Okay? I'm leading this pilgrimage in May. You must come. It's going to be amazing. Okay? We are monitoring the coronavirus, so we're watching that, what will happen. We have a group already ready to go. I led another one of these a year and a half ago. It's a sacred, this is the view from Laudo. It's a remote retreat center in Nepal, in the Mount Everest region of Nepal, where Lama Zopa Rinpoche has a sacred cave. It's a small cave, and I've done a lot of retreat there, and Rinpoche asked a few of us connected to Laudo to help raise money to support some of the projects. So I took a group up a year and a half ago, and I've been up there many, many times, and it was very interesting to lead like 23 people up there. We do retreat for 3 days. Part of it's silent. I guide meditations. We have a day in Kathmandu. I show you a few off-the-beaten-track temples, and then we fly up. We trek several days slowly to acclimatize to the elevation, 3-day retreat, and then we have a day and a half to explore the area around there. There's a big nunnery, and also Rinpoche's birth home, where he was born. It's very moving, and I have to say, it was one of the best things I've done in this life. And I've been up there many times, and it was just so moving. We had a wonderful group. We have another nice group, and I'm hoping it'll be a little bit smaller this time. It'll be easier, and we won't be in the peak season. So if you're interested, there's more details on my website, which is on here. There's also some audio and video, if that's helpful, of teachings on here. If that's useful to you, you can take a picture like that. Laudo. So when I go up to Laudo and I do a lot of retreat, and I've told my sister and brother, should I die up there, they're going to deal, like my body's going to be cremated. So there's no hassle getting me off the mountain as a body with, and they're like, definitely. They don't want to have to transport me home and have to come. So it's like, I just tell them that. They know that, like, you can come over and scatter my ashes or do what you want, but you won't be transporting a body, because it's really, that can be a lot for people. And also, are you going to make people jump through hoops to scatter your ashes in some remote place of East Borneo? Really think about it. Is that, think about what's convenient for people, things like that. So let me also talk about organ donation, according to this tradition, is a personal decision, individual decision. If you're a great meditator, some people may opt not to donate organs. And the reason is they obviously have to take the organs right away. So they'll keep you on life support. But some people believe if they're great meditators, they would like the 2 to 3 days for the consciousness to leave naturally, not to have it obstructed with the physical body being cut into, and things can have some effect on what the subtle mind is doing, because they have a connection, even though they're separate. So that's a personal decision. If you really have a great motivation to really benefit many beings, which your body could do, that's a personal decision. Buddhism doesn't say one way or another like that, but I think if you have a huge motivation to do that, it could be very beneficial. We also, regarding euthanasia, Buddhism does not euthanize. We don't euthanize our animals, let alone people. That's a hard one for people. We have a little bit of a denial with our animals in this culture where we say we put them to sleep. You're not putting them to sleep. You're killing them. So it's difficult when your animal, your pet, your beloved pet is dying in a lot of pain. I've been with a lot of animals till they died. It seems brutal, and yet you can get sleeping pills and painkillers and break them up for the animal and let them live out that animal existence until they naturally pass, is, Tibetan Buddhism would say, better to do than to euthanize, where you will get some of the killing karma, as will the vet, even though you have a good motivation. So your motivation does color that to make it obviously a lesser negativity, but they do say harming has some negative repercussion. That's Buddhism's view of euthanasia. And I would say suicide is seen in Buddhism as a very, very harmful act, a very tragic act. To avoid that at any length, if you are suicidal yourself, please seek help. If you know somebody that is, ask them specifically if they have a method, what they would do. If they really have a method and they're like, I have a gun or I have the pills, definitely get them help right away. If they're anyone who has tried to commit suicide while on a mental ward or in the hospital, they're at the highest risk of succeeding. So it's, my brother-in-law committed suicide. It really cuts a very jagged slash through all your loved ones and things. It's not a solution at all. And Buddhism sees it as perpetuating. Sometimes suicides continue in each life to have that wish to kill themselves, It goes on like that. When people die as well, it's really helpful to get grief counseling if you can. It's a specific type of counseling if you feel you need it. Hospices are very good at supporting that and offering that service. And especially for children, if a parent suddenly dies or they lose a parent and they don't quite understand. It's also important to know there is grief when loved ones when they die. It's a natural part of the dying process. So allow yourself the space to experience the grief. Buddhism isn't kind of like, oh, I shouldn't be sad. It's natural. It is sad. It's really sad. And the normal grief cycle is about 2 years. So of a natural death, of a death of an old person or somebody lingering with cancer, it's about 2 years. But for sudden deaths, suicide, untimely death, somebody younger, it can take longer. But it's also important to know that the grief ends so that you're not held hostage as a victim for the rest of your life, where some people never get over it. You should get over it and use your life in a meaningful way to help other people that experience that. It can be very helpful, like that. And so some things, when people are dying on a practical level, if you're a caregiver, caretaker or caregiver, some things when you show up at a dying person's bedside or you're visiting them, sometimes it's helpful. These are just a few little tips of, sometimes you don't need to hand out advice. It's just about showing up and being there. They don't necessarily want advice at that point. That's okay. Or to the caretaker that you're showing up, and you're going to tell them now what they need to do when they've been taking care of the person. Okay? You also, in some ways, there's an ordinariness of death. We might feel it's not ordinary, but occasionally just seeing the ordinariness of this. This is a natural state of being. There's natural things that happen to us as we develop and grow up, and there's natural things that happen as we wind down, like that. It doesn't have to be a hysterical thing, like that. Expressing friendship in the face of death is enormously helpful. Showing up with a friend, holding your friend's hand, listening to them. I did one of my friends dying, doing practices she wanted me to do. She was too weak. She's like, will you do this practice? I'm just going to lay on the couch. Can you do this practice for me? Sure. I did that for people many times. I'll run the errands for you. I'll bring some soup over Thursday night. We'll watch that TV show together that you like, Communicating honestly with the people dying and the people taking care of them. That's hard for people. And especially after death has happened. That's hard for people. My mom died and people came over to the house. My siblings were there, my brother, sister. My mom died, and then people come in and then they say, she's in a better place. Over and over. She's in a better place now. She's in a better place. And my brother finally came into the kitchen and turned to me and he said, how do they know where she is? He was so tired of hearing that, right? It's better, my sister, her husband committed suicide. It was horrible. And one of the friends turned up and just said to her, I don't know what to say. And my sister said that was the most honest thing she heard. Like, people get uncomfortable and they say all these things, and this friend just said, I don't know what to say. My sister said, thank you. That's So just kind of communicating honestly. It's also okay sometimes to be silent. You just show up, you're sitting there. Sometimes there are no words. Just being here with people. Like that. Sometimes with somebody dying, talking simply can be helpful. I don't need to get into some whole thing about, the nature of the physical universe and just talking simply. Sometimes you may want to reorient somebody. Hospice work does that. People get confused at the end who are dying. They get confused. One of my friends, the first person that died at Tara Hospice, a friend of mine, I was there with another person, another volunteer that we're both friends of hers, and she was dozing, but she woke up and she was agitated in the bed and she couldn't move or anything. And we went over, she was calling, we went over and she said, what's happening? What's happening? And then my friend, we both looked down and my friend said to her, you're dying. She said, remember you're dying. And then she was kind of like, had a moment, and then she went, oh, right, that's right. Now I know I can't move, and, So sometimes it's just kind of reorienting them. So this takes also not freaking out. Can you show up and not freak out? It's hard. So make sure you're composed when you come in to see the dying person. They're still alive, and also for the people around them. If you get hysterical, they could get hysterical, or they could ask you to leave sometimes. So it's a natural course of things. Take a deep breath. If it's hard for you, if you're about to burst into tears, take a deep breath, try to move out of the room, have your cry elsewhere, like that. Unless it's something where it's a really close friend and you want to cry together. That's different. Find the appropriateness of when can I cry with somebody, or when is it not appropriate here, like that. How do you deal with pain and suffering? This is really hard. How do you deal with pain and suffering? So first of all, how do you deal in your own life with it? Okay, because you can't fix stuff. You can't fix the dying person. They're dying. They're soon not going to be in this realm anymore with us. And we want to fix it. We want to make it all better. And now they're reeling in pain. What are you going to do? Can you just be there with it? Maybe one guy in the hospice thing I did, I was paired with him. Emotional support is what I was trained in, emotional support counselor, right? So in those days with AIDS, in the end, it was horrible disease. People died in horrible pain. And I came into the house. It was, night I told him I'd come over shortly before he died. And as soon as I get to the door, his lover's at the door. He goes, I'm out of here. So he leaves the house, and I hear Rick screaming in the back, screaming in horrible pain. Couldn't get, the pen meds weren't working. And I hear this horrible screaming. Like, all I want to do is leave. Like, please, I don't know how I'm going to do this. So I just walked in. I knew I had to go into his room. Do you want me to be here right now? Do you want me in the room? And all he could do, and he was just screaming. He screamed for 45 minutes. So all I could do, and I was all clammy and flushed and just wanted to get out of there, wanted the floor to drop out, right? And I just managed to come in, and I said, is it okay if I sit on the bed? And I sat down next to him on the bed. I couldn't do anything. And I just occasionally, I said, is it okay if I put my hand on your back? And I just sat there with him. Just sat there for like 45 minutes. And it changes. Everything changes. So it changed. Unfortunately, the pain subsided. And he stopped screaming. And then I got him back into bed because he was sitting on the edge of the bed. He couldn't really move, sitting on the edge of the bed. And then I remember I got him back in bed, the covers, and then I was moving away to get some water or something. And then he grabbed my wrist, I remember, and he said, thank you for not leaving. Thank you for being here. Just, sometimes they just want somebody there. You just want to scream with somebody. It's really hard space. But once I did it one time, now I could do it again. It was easier the next time because I'd practiced it. I'd done it once. I lived through it. It didn't kill me. It's really, really hard. You're not going to be able to fix things. You try your best. The other thing about when I mentioned talking simply, communicating, not freaking out, but the other thing is, you come into it, the death thing, it's your shift or you're visiting family, is allowing chaos. Death can be chaotic. You got a change of the hospice worker. And my dad's, his assisted living place, I come into the room and now they're moving this crane because they were just moving him and they were just changing him and there was somebody there and then they were training a new person and then the other shift was coming on and I was in the room and I was like, okay, what's happening? Just let them get that out of the way. And then I'm like, okay, wait, let me stand over here. Hi, Dad. Yeah, I'll be here in a second. Let them just, it's like that sometimes. Sometimes the bed has to be changed and, so you just do, my mom's room, they were bringing in, now they have to do another x-ray. Now they're going to change this. Now this team comes in the days. And sometimes the evenings are really peaceful if somebody's in a hospital because there's less shifts, less stuff. They're going to do most of that stuff during the day. Right? It's why Lama Zopa Rinpoche turned up at my mother's hospital bed at 11 at night for 3 hours. Nobody comes in. He could do all the practices he wanted. Like that. So incredibly kind, right? Okay, we talked about that. So maintaining a sense of humor. This is important. There is humor in death. There's humor in death. Okay. One of my friends, his brother was dying of AIDS. The parents had divorced years before. They had remarried. There were other kids, extended family. They all came back together, all around the hospital bed. Right? He wanted his mother to read Stephen Levine books. If you're familiar, very, very helpful books. Who Dies is one of them. Stephen Levine wrote, and he died, okay? But wrote really helpful books on death and dying. I highly recommend. So he wanted his mother, who was an ordinary Long Island Jewish housewife, to read these books. She'd never been exposed to this before. She only found out her son was homosexual when he got AIDS and was dying. Like this whole world was blown open, right? So she read the books. I was so proud of her. She read the books, and then in the end, he was in a kind of semi-coma for 2 days. The whole family's there. He really hasn't spoken in like a day, and she leans over him, bless her heart. This is her kid dying. She leans over him and she says, "Stephen, go to the light. Go to the light." Like she's really trying, And sure enough, he half lifts his head up, opens his eyes, and he looks at her, and he always had a funny sense of humor, and he looks at her and he goes, "I'm trying, Mom, I'm trying." My friend said he couldn't believe. So there's humor in, right? And there's times you're trying to just, I had a choice with my dad, and I decided to kind of minorly lie. Why? More beneficial, right? So what it was going on for him in the end with the cancer is they said he may start hallucinating. A little bit. He was very lucid right to the end. And this is probably Lama Zopa Rinpoche's blessing, right? My father had no pain right to the end. So a couple weeks before he dies, or a week before he dies, he gets agitated. He looks at my brother and he goes, "We need to move the truck. We need to move the truck." His father had a moving truck long ago, right? "We need to move the truck." And my brother says, "What truck?" "Truck." And he says, "The Dodge. We need to move the Dodge. They're going to tow it." And my brother says, "We don't have the Dodge, Dad. You sold it in the 50s. You sold it before I was born. We don't have that truck." And my father got really agitated, insisting, "Please, we need to move the truck. We need to move the truck." And they start fighting. So my keys are on my father's hospital table, and I stand up and I grab the keys and I said, "I'm going to go move the truck." And he goes, "Where are you going to put it?" This is his complex, where his assisted living place. He goes, "Where are you going to put it?" I go, "I don't know. I'll sort it. I'll go move the truck. Don't worry about it." And I leave for 15 minutes and I come back, right? And I come back and I thought, I'm not going to mention the truck unless he brings it up. But as soon as I walk in, he goes, "What'd you do with the truck?" Right? My sister, brother, and I, we all look at each other like, oh, God. And I said, "Oh, you won't believe it. There's a big garage on the back part of the property, and they let me put it there, right? And it's part of your plan. It's free." And he sits back in his chair and he goes, "That's terrific," right? But then my father was a little tech person, right? He was an engineer. So then he said to me, and he had a smartphone, and he said to me, "I want you to take a picture of it. I want to see where it is." I couldn't believe it, right? We looked at each other so I said to him, "Well, you know what? It's kind of far. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll take a picture tomorrow. It's kind of far." And he goes, okay. He goes, "That's great. That's terrific. So happy." So then the next day we were hoping he'd never remember it again. He brought it up a little bit once and we just kind of got by it. And then I walked out with my sister later and my sister says to me, very skillful. She's like, "What are you going to do? You don't want to argue at that point. It would just agitate him." So I made a decision. Okay, little bit of not really accurate truth there, but, for the best. I thought it was for the best, like that. Any questions and anything? Because we're out of time. But I just wanted to take you through kind of traditional approach and then some things to think about in the practical application of being around people dying or their caregivers. And if you are a caregiver for old parents or a sick friend or anyone, and you're caring for somebody just in their old age, or you're caring for them until they die, please, please, please take care of yourself. Please get proper support. It's really, really hard on caretakers and caregivers, and many people I know now are caring for aging parents. And you need proper support, you need breaks, you need a team of people to do it. You can't do it by yourself. If you have a martyr syndrome, you may try, but you're going to be really miserable and you're going to be really fried, and that's also not the best care for the person. So I can't really speak about that enough, to have enough people helping them if it's possible. Other comments, questions, anything that you wanted to hear that you haven't heard tonight?
It was a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot jammed into 2 hours, but you get some idea. I think hopefully helpful like that.
Yeah, I just want to thank you too for the information and the heartfelt examples and guidance. It's very, very helpful for me, and I'm sure it'll be on my mind for many, many years to come. The question I have is about physical contact. And you mentioned on the one hand, for the practitioner, that might not be so helpful. But in my experience and my own projection of my own needs, physical contact would be really helpful. So maybe you can help.
Physical contact when you're dying?
Yes.
Like wanting physical contact?
Yeah, rubbing of an arm or a massage.
Yeah,
or,
I think if you're dying and you can express that and you can put that in your wishes, exactly what you'd like and not like, I think express that. If you can still express it, say, could you rub my feet? While you're actively dying like that, I think you can say it. I think it's just when the person goes into coma and is near death, they're saying better not to touch the body. Again, according to Tibetan Buddhism, like that, because you're trying to have the consciousness attracted up to leave from an upper opening of the body. That's one belief system.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that clarifies. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. But certainly when people were still not in a coma and were, a week or two away from death, giving them a massage, holding their hand, giving them a foot massage or anything like that, I think could be helpful when they're definitely resonating with that, for sure. Like that. So maybe we'll close there. I hope it's been helpful. And I'd like to, if we can read from these gold prayer books, some dedication prayers on page 235, and taking whatever positive energy we may have created from this time together to help us have peaceful deaths. But a really good way to do that is to have a meaningful life right now and set up a rich, consistent spiritual practice for yourself that will be there when you're dying. And may it also help us move along a path to becoming fully realized beings, as then we're unlimited in benefiting all living beings. Page 235, we can read in English. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. Just as the brave Manjushri and Samantabhadra too realize things as they are, I too dedicate all these merits in the best way that I may follow their perfect example. Page 244, the short, long life prayers for His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. You who uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. So I'd like to dedicate also to the great flourishing of Ocean of Compassion Buddhist Center and all of our FPMT centers, and for the coronavirus to stop its spread immediately and for all the people to be healed and no longer die, and all the other problems on the planet to be sorted and people to be released from suffering. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a peaceful death.